What are you super nerdy about? Star Trek, Tolkien, and Elder Scrolls lore. I'm also super into maps. I love maps too. Especially old maps. They're so beautiful. How could we not be interested in old maps? The Middle Ages. Love me some castles and knights. What's a random fact that you'd like to share? I loved the whole medieval thing when I was younger. Not OP, but one I love is that the armor knights wore during combat and contest sports, like jousting, was actually not as cumbersome as it is portrayed in modern media. They were able to move lethally fast in most types of the armor, especially French and Italian designs. The sword strikes they would use often involved going for gouging through gaps in the armor, like through the visor. Gruesome business. It's also far less exhausting to wear for prolonged battles than people think. Modern equipment weighs nearly as much, but isn't nearly as well distributed, so it's probably equally exhausting to wear. It's actually incredibly exhausting to wear. Source. I fight in armor. Okay, rephrase what I said, because it wasn't completely accurate. Compared to modern armor, full plate was similarly exhausting to wear. However, the manner of fighting in the period was more exhausting, so that contributed to the armor being seemingly heavier. Also, fighting with those weights can only be sustained in short bursts, so mad respect to those that had to fight 4 hours on end. But armor is way more exhaustive to wear than movies and such would make you think. Also my source. Fight in armor as well. Microsoft Excel. My husband started calling me at work for Excel tips and it took me by surprise how much it turns me on. Nintendo, specifically the Legend of Zelda series. They're with you, my guy. Astronomy. I love space stuff. I would make a career out of it if I could. I would make a career out of it if I could. What's stopping you? Honestly? Nothing, but my own self-doubts. Shoot for the stars. But seriously, you got this. I say do it. You'll be surprised what you're capable of achieving. Music theory. A question and a story. Q. Ever hear pop music and find yourself knowing exactly where the songwriter made a quote? Or a particular hook where there is a they didn't just do that? Did they? Yes. Yes they did. The Flat Ivy in Beyonce's All the Single Ladies gets me every time. Story. As was told to me, the band Chicago got the progressions for some of their early hits by copying out of their music theory textbooks and giving them different rhythms. But much of the sound was they were copying classical texts. It's been years since I studied MT properly. The few times it clicked, it was fascinating. Movies. I try to watch at least 3 movies every week that I've never seen before. Any recommendations? I would recommend Your Name. I don't like anime, but this movie was perfect in every way. From the art, story, soundtrack, even the title. Such a beautiful movie. Goosebumps. Knives. Not in a creepy way or anything. I just think they're interesting. Yes. I used to buy loads, to be honest, they're kinda cheap. But I really want a cold steel one. My favorite has to be my Ka-Bar though. I have the Ka-Bar knife my dad carried when he served in Vietnam. He won't say, but I suspect there's bodies on it. I am a huge band nerd. I'll continue to be in concert bands for as long as humanly possible. I also love airplanes, specifically jumbo planes like the A380. Too bad the A380 and the 747S are dying out. 3D modeling and coding. Both great things to learn. I'm a nerd of all trades, master of none. Into so many different things. Sparse. World War II history. Nice. I really want to meet more people like you in real life. I've only been getting into the history of the wars in the past year or so and nobody is ever interested to talk about it. The American Civil War and The Legend of Zelda. I don't see the link. It's a link to the past. We were not prepared for the Spanish Inquisition. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. Physics. Star Wars. Warhammer 40k. Ancestry and genealogy. Mathematics. I've always really enjoyed it, and could easily go on for hours about its history and different applications. I also recreationally study combinatorics with a really nice professor I met last year, and we emailed back and forth, occasionally adding our findings to the OEIS. Metal music and Nintendo. You and I would probably be friends in real life. A lot of freaking random TV shows and Life is Strange. Useless knowledge of fictional characters from consuming so many kid chapter books growing up. Violet Alden of the Boxcar Children loved drawing and wore a lot of pigtails, according to whoever illustrated the books. Red-tailed hawks sound like see you, according to Animorphs. And I actually looked up the sound as an adult and it is accurate. And the worst is for some reason, maybe because there were 100 plus books and they really hammer in these character descriptions in every freaking book. I know the Babysitter's Club the best. Mallory Pike has 7 freaking siblings and for some reason doesn't have a middle name. And yet they give Stacy the name of Anastasia Elizabeth McGill like an English debutante. I also hold useless knowledge of Harry Potter and his dark materials, but that makes me happier than knowing Shannon Kilburn's family liked purebred Bernese Mountain Dogs and her face was interesting, which is slightly insulting if you ask me. History. I'm addicted to weird facts about history that sound made up, but aren't. The Dark Souls lore is really deep and fantastic if you look into it. There is a lot of videos out there and I highly recommend you take a look. 15 years of World of Warcraft and still counting. Specifically the gold farming part. Books by Rick Riordan and TV shows by Dan Schneider. Geography. Jiu-jitsu. The rise of alternative and grunge music in the late 80s and early 90s. Horror films and its history, tropes, analysis. Weather. Don't ask why. Kind of weird I suppose, but teaching and understanding how people learn. I became such a nerd for it that I made it a career and hobby. Alligators. Also boobs. Quantum physics. I'm not an expert, but I love tanks. Music. I know every tiny detail about nearly every song, band or genre from the second half of the 20th century, but I still can't retain anything useful. Learning how to cook amazing plant-based food while listening to audiobooks has kept me sane this year. I might be obsessed. Pokemon. I can't help but talk about it, whether it be the games or the show, once someone brings it up to me. Anime. Harry Potter, My Chemical Romance, and Panic at the Disco. Nature. Insects, birds, and mountains more specifically. Harry Potter, My Hero Academia, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Five Nights at Freddy's, vines, animals in general. I could write books in how much I know about these. Video games in general, specifically retro gaming and gaming history. Photography. Horror. The Witcher. Pokemon. The Legend of Zelda. The Elder Scrolls. Halo. Jurassic Park. The Lord of the Rings. Avatar. The Last Airbender. Age of Empires. History. Biology. The Beatles. Pink Floyd. Electric Light Orchestra. A Song of Ice and Fire. Evolution and Great Apes. Computers I suppose. From hardware to coding, from gaming to networking, and in general just being a power user. Configuring my PC in the exact way I want. Basketball. I'm only 14 years old, but I know the NBA's history way back in the 60s. 3D printers. You can buy one for under $200 now, and they do a great job these days. You couldn't imagine such great resolution from a home printer a few years ago. Bought my first printer 3 weeks ago. It works great. There are 3D files of characters available for downloading and printing. I can create characters in free software like Blender. Great way to spend quarantine weekends. My D&D friends appreciate that. Gardening and video games. Minecraft. 80s horror movies. Sailor Moon. Refer to my username smiley face. The mechanics of cars and modifying them. Gas engines are such intricate machines, and knowing how each little thing you change can have either a huge effect or nothing at all. Suspension is another area that has so much science packed into it, with how certain geometries and settings affect the handling of a vehicle under different conditions. Knowing the little tricks for different cars, man, it's just so neat. Firearms. In a similar way to cars, I am interested in how guns function along with the history of what armies used what and why. It's a topic that's harder to bring up with people cause lots of people are dumbasses who think liking guns makes you a psycho. Industrial Revolution history. I'm just very fascinated by this period of history. I think it's much more interesting than medieval era since it saw an explosion of groundbreaking technological achievements, as well as philosophical ones. In addition, learning how certain processes were performed, or how specific things were done is quite interesting. Chemistry, physics, math. I'm getting a degree in chem, and I could ramble on about how everything is so amazing yet so tenuous and often theoretical. Geography. Big fan of physical world building and designing countries, maps, cities, law, etc. Socially unacceptable politics. I'm a fervent anarchist. This and the guns thing are not to come up in conversation unless I've eased people into knowing me for a while. For obvious reasons. In addition to obtaining a chemistry degree, it's not a great look. Yes, I have been accused of being a terrorist. Not by a state though. Fingers crossed.